I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. The former top Trump aide, Peter Navarro, is set to go to trial for contempt of Congress, 2 criminal counts brought by the Department of Justice. His trial is set for November 17th. There have been a number of very interesting developments in his case that I'd like to discuss with you now and kind of break down the lay of the land of his trial. Trial is before a federal judge. Amit Mehta is the judge overseeing the criminal proceedings there, whereas Bannon, who was convicted of the same charges that Peter Navarro is being charged with, contempt of Congress, not showing up to a January 6th committee deposition and not producing records in response to this subpoena, the exact same charges of Peter Navarro. Bannon was before Judge Nichols, who was a Trump appointee, and Bannon largely tried to assert the same defenses and inject the same circus type environment that Peter Navarro is trying to do here. Bannon's attempts before the Trump appointed Judge Nichols were all rejected by the judge. He was convicted of a jury. He's now facing sentencing this month in October, and he'll be sentenced. Soon he could face up to 2 years in jail, and Peter Navarro's trial is set for November 17th. Peter Navarro filed a motion to dismiss the criminal charges against him, alleging that he was selectively prosecuted, which was summarily rejected by Judge Amit Mehta, who said, "That's absolutely ridiculous, sir. You simply didn't respond to the subpoena that was issued to you, and as a result, you've been found in contempt of Congress, and the Department of Justice is pursuing criminal charges against you." So Peter Navarro's attempt at trying to get his case dismissed was denied, and as his case starts proceeding to trial on November 17th, the Department of Justice just filed what's called a motion in limine, or a motion to exclude Peter Navarro from making the types of ridiculous arguments that Peter Navarro wants to try to make as this case goes to trial, because it's irrelevant material, it's contrary to the law, it would cause undue confusion in the jury. Basically, he's trying to inject things that the law doesn't allow him to inject because he's completely wrong on the issues, or he's just trying to distract and deflect from a very simple case. Like you'll recall, in the Steve Bannon case, it was like a 2-day trial. The Department of Justice, I think, basically called 2 witnesses. They called someone who just issued the subpoena, and then I think there was one other person who was aware of the chain of custody of the subpoena, and the questions were very simple. Did you issue the subpoena to Steve Bannon? Yes. Did he show up? No. That's it. Not showing up is an example of a willfully, it shows the intent there, it shows it's willful because you didn't show up to a properly authorized subpoena. The elements are as simple as that. Steve Bannon wanted to make a number of arguments like, oh, I was relying on my attorney, which he was foreclosed from doing because reliance on your attorney's bad advice is not a defense in the DC circuit, or pretty much any circuit, to allege why you didn't show up to a validly issued subpoena. Steve Bannon also tried to argue that he thought he had executive privilege, but being mistaken about whether you had executive privilege or not is not a defense. And Peter Navarro largely mirrors that here. So the Department of Justice is bringing this to the attention of Judge Amit Mehta and saying none of this should come in. One of the other things that Peter Navarro is trying to argue here as well is that he was entrapped by trying to assert an entrapment defense, but as the government points out, an entrapment defense is utterly ridiculous here, and they explain that if he wanted to assert an entrapment defense, he'd have to hit all of these elements. A defendant seeking to raise an entrapment defense must furnish proof of the following. 1, that the government agent actively misled the defendant about the state of the law defining the offense. 2, that the government agent was responsible for interpreting, administering, enforcing the law defining the offense. 3, that the defendant actually relied on the agent's misleading pronouncement in committing the offense. And 4, that the defendant's reliance was reasonable in light of the identity of the agent, the point of law misrepresented, and the substance of the misrepresentation. And the Department of Justice says Peter Navarro hasn't been able to show any one of those single elements. How did the Department of Justice entrap him? How did the January 6th committee entrap him? The January 6th committee sent him a subpoena. He did not respond to the subpoena. He did not show up when he was told to show up. And as a result, he was held in contempt. It is that simple. So that's what they say about his absurd entrapment defense, and he shouldn't be able to even raise that at trial. Another defense that Peter Navarro may try to raise, which the Department of Justice says he shouldn't even be permitted to raise, is a defense called a public authority defense, which is essentially a defendant's claim that the government specifically authorized him to commit an illegal act. So here he's arguing that the January 6th committee authorized him not to show up to the January 6th committee. I mean, this is just how absurd these MAGA Republicans' arguments are. He's legitimately saying right here that the January 6th committee authorized him not to show up. That's absurd. And here the Department of Justice says he clearly can't bring that as a defense because he has no proof of that ever happening, and that absolutely didn't happen at all. One of the things that the Department of Justice says he also shouldn't be able to bring up is any claim that he believed he had executive privilege. As the Department of Justice explained, the law is clear that former presidents are not able to assert executive privilege. The ability to assert executive privilege is with the current executive branch. But in any event, Donald Trump never provided any notice of executive privilege. So even if you wanted to try to make that argument, Trump never even gave you executive privilege that he wasn't allowed to give you in the first place. And what the Department of Justice rightfully points out is a mistaken belief in the law here, a mistaken belief that you have executive privilege cannot be raised as a defense. And what the Department of Justice also says is Peter Navarro is trying to introduce these emails into trial to try to prove that he was mistaken about his executive privilege based on communication with Trumpers when he got the subpoena. But in any event, none of that should come in because he never had executive privilege in the first place. So these emails are utterly irrelevant. But these emails are very interesting to read. And this is the email that Peter Navarro wanted to introduce at trial. So this is what it says. This is an email from February 9th, 2022 from Peter Navarro to Trump's Mar-a-Lago crew. He said, got subpoenaed for January 6th. Here's my statement. Please share this with the boss, Trump, who they call Orange Jesus, these ridiculous MAGAs. Not here, but that's what Liz Cheney said that the Republicans call him in the cloakroom, the Republican cloakroom. How pathetic are these people? This is what it says. Statement of Peter Navarro. As the domestic terrorists running the January 6th partisan witch hunt are well aware, President Trump has invoked executive privilege. He didn't invoke executive privilege. And it is not my privilege to waive. None of that happened. They should negotiate any waiver of the privilege with the president and his attorneys directly, not through me. I refer this tribunal to Chapter 21 of In Trump Time for what it is in the public records about the Green Bay sweep. It's like referring him to his book, The Green Bay Sweep Plan to Ensure Election Integrity. The last 3 people on God's good earth who wanted chaos. I can't even read this thing, but this is what he said, show to Trump. And then he goes, use this as you like. Again, to Trump's Mar-a-Lago crew. Pence betrayed Trump. Mark Short is a Koch network dog. Meadow is a fool and a coward. Cheney and Kinzinger are useful idiots for Nancy Pelosi and the woke left. Then he goes, use this if you like. I note for the record the subpoena was leaked to key members of the press well before I received it. This was a screw job to every reporter who didn't get the leak. And it underscores the political and partisan nature of the inquiry, which discredits itself on a daily basis. This is what Navarro wants to introduce in trial. And the Department of Justice is saying, 1, this guy is batshit crazy. Number 2, what is this? This is irrelevant to anything. And he wants them to show Pence betrayed Trump. Mark Short is a Koch network dog. You didn't have executive privilege. It's not yours to claim. Donald Trump can't give you executive privilege. He didn't give you executive privilege at all. And then they want to show an email between Navarro and the Trump's Mar-a-Lago crew that they were helping him edit his lawsuit. And that's what Navarro wants to introduce at his trial. What's going to happen? Judge Amit Mehta, like Judge Nichols, who was appointed by Trump, Judge Amit Mehta, appointed by Obama, is going to grant the Department of Justice motion to eliminate. This case is going to be a simple trial about Peter Navarro not showing up, not responding to a subpoena because he is a spreader of the big lie, that he is a QAnon cult member who thinks he's above our law and order, rolls up his sleeves and spreads ridiculous, dangerous conspiracies every single freaking day. And what the case is just going to be about is very simple. Did you send him the subpoena? Yes or no? Yes. Did he show up in response to the subpoena? No. I've got no further questions. And then Peter Navarro, we'll see. Bannon didn't take the stand. We'll see if Peter Navarro takes the stand, but Peter Navarro is not going to be able to veer out and have any of, talk about his random conspiracies. It's just going to be, did you show up? Yes or no? Did you know about the date? And did you show up? Yes or no? One of the other things in this motion that the Department of Justice talks about is that one of the things Peter Navarro is trying to argue, and we've seen this and heard this before with these MAGAs who don't show up with the subpoena, that they basically claim that the January 6th committee as a body is not legitimate. And here what the Department of Justice says is, one, that absolutely is false to begin with. But anyway, you waived those objections. You didn't object to the subpoena on that basis, so you can't bring that up in trial now. And anyway, it's a ridiculous, frivolous argument. So Navarro's not going to be able to make these arguments. He's going to go to trial. He's going to lose that trial, and he's going to get sentenced, somewhere between 60 days and 2 years. And, I suspect that it'll probably be somewhere in the middle when he gets sentenced. And we'll keep our eye on Steve Bannon's sentencing for contempt of Congress, which he was found guilty for. He tried to file a motion for new trial. That was denied by Judge Nichols, and he's set to be sentenced shortly as well. So the wheels of justice are turning. They're turning in the right direction. People are being held accountable for their actions, and we will keep you updated here, of course, on the MeidasTouch Network. Hey, make sure you hit the subscribe button right now. We're on our way to 1 million subs. Thanks to you. And also, we are an independent media network. We're not funded by any outside investors. Zip, zero. If you want to help grow this network with us and you want to help in that process, what you can do is go to our Patreon site at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. There are different membership tiers with different level of exclusive benefits, but most importantly, it's a way you can help grow this network where we don't have to have any outside investors and keep this 100% independent. That's patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network.
This November is Rowvember. MeidasTouch just released its brand new collection of Rowvember t-shirts and pins to let the country know what's at stake this upcoming midterm election. Go to store.MeidasTouch.com to grab yours. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.